Hey guys, this is Preston Cave with Super Summer Evangelism Training Camps. Super Summer has as its main purpose to help students to know and share the gospel. We want you to be able to know the gospel personally, and then we want you to be able to share the gospel with your friends and with your family members. And so during these training videos, we're going to teach you a new gospel presentation that we've come up with that is broken into two parts. The first part is our testimony. It's so important for us to be able to share our testimony with our friends and family members. And if you haven't developed your testimony yet, it's time. Because our testimony helps to show the world how the gospel story, how God's story has been applied to our lives. So we're going to help you to develop your testimony. And then secondly, we're going to help you to develop a gospel presentation that is super easy. All you have to know is how to draw one symbol, memorize 3 verses in the Bible, and know 4 words. One symbol, 3 verses, 4 words. It is that easy. It's going to be a great journey together, but first, let's get started developing our testimony. Before we walk through a worksheet to help you to develop your testimony, I want you to hear my testimony. It goes like this. If you really knew me, you would know that I haven't always been this outgoing, and I haven't always been a real solid Christian. There was a time in my life, whenever I was 17 and 18, that I was actually a really lukewarm Christian. I was a hypocrite. I was a hypocritical Christian. You see, I was saved at the age of 10 at a church camp, and about the age of 15, I felt like God was calling me to the ministry. But it was also about the age of 15 that I started to realize if God is calling me to ministry, that means I have to stand in front of people and talk to people. I have to do videos like this. And that terrified me. Because if you really knew me, you would know that I'm actually an introvert. You know, a lot of times I tell people that, and they're surprised to hear that I'm an introvert, but I'm really shy. And whenever I was 15, God called me to the ministry. It terrified me. I didn't think I could do it. And so I started to rebel at the age of 15. And by the time I was 17 and 18, I was smoking pot, and I was going to parties all the time. But one thing that I still did is that I would still come home at night, even whenever I was half wasted, and I would lay down in bed and I would ask God to forgive me for what I had just done. And there was one particular night, I was 18 years old, I remember it well. I laid down, I was half drunk or half stoned, I can't remember, but I laid down and I did my usual, God, would you please forgive me? But this night was different, because this night I said, God, would you please forgive? And then he stopped me. And that was the first time he had stopped me in a prayer. And this is what God said. God said, Preston, aren't you planning on doing that same thing tomorrow night? Well, I couldn't lie. This is God we're talking about. And so I said, yes. And he said, then don't ask for forgiveness until you're willing to repent. He didn't ask me to stop asking for forgiveness until I was willing to be perfect. He just said, don't ask for forgiveness if you know you're going to do it again. And that really bothered me, because for the first time I had to deal with the fact that I couldn't just say, would you please forgive me, and my guilt be gone. And so for about a month I cried myself to sleep every night. And I remember there were a couple nights that I woke up and my top teeth were behind my bottom teeth, and they were pushing against my bottom teeth. I learned years later that that's one of the definitions of gnashing your teeth. So for about a month in my life, whenever I was 18, God allowed me to experience a small taste of hell by weeping and gnashing of my teeth. It terrified me. And then it happened. I was 18, and all of a sudden, about a month after that night, I had a bad car wreck, and I should have died. And it was all my fault. I was experiencing the consequences of my decisions. But God was gracious and God was merciful. And not only should I have died, but God allowed me not to die, and he allowed me to walk out of the hospital a month later. It was a really dramatic time. I'm not going to go into all the details, but it was a miraculous recovery that can only be accredited to God. Now I share that to share this. That was a grace of God. And even though I still experience pain in my body sometimes from the effects of the wreck, I can look at the pain that I'm experiencing and know that that pain is actually a grace from God. I should be dead, but yet God is allowing me to still feel and still walk and still experience love, joy, and peace, and even pain. And that's my story. So if you really knew me, you would know that on the outside, it may look like I've got everything together, but on the inside, I am redeemed, and I've got a memory from the past of when I was a hypocrite, I was a broken, lukewarm, insecure Christian who was scared to death to talk to anybody. And God took that broken vessel and He somehow made beauty even out of the rubble. That's my story. Now, if you'll notice something in that story that I just shared, you'll notice a couple things. I wasn't too detailed in what all I did. I didn't get into the nitty gritty of everything that I did. You would be embarrassed. I would be embarrassed if I shared with you everything about my story. It's important that we don't share too much of the details. That's really important when we share a testimony. But if you'll also notice, I started my story with these words, if you really knew me. Because I think it's important. Sometimes when we share a testimony with people, they need to know the real us, and we need to be vulnerable and open with them. Say, I'm not all that you think I am. A lot of times, a non-believer will look at us as Christians and they think that we've got it all together. We don't have it all together. They need to know that. So a line like, if you really knew me, then you would know blank, is such a freeing line, because it helps the people that you're talking to realize, wow, they're just like me. You see, for me, whenever I was a teenager, if you really knew me, you would know that I struggled with insecurities big time growing up. And I still do struggle with insecurities from time to time. So if you really knew me, you would know these things. And it helps when you're talking to somebody and you're sharing your testimony to start with that. If you really knew me. So why don't you go ahead and write that down on your form. If you really knew me, and then that will be the starting point, the starting line for you to be able to share your story. Your story it is going to be different than mine. My story was not a story of salvation. I was saved at the age of 10. You might be saved, have been saved at a young age. So your testimony may look like mine, or it may look completely different. Your testimony may be a moment where God really showed up and spoke to you in a dramatic way. I don't know what your testimony is. It could be a salvation testimony. It could be a testimony to show God's faithfulness, to show God's grace, to show God's mercy, to show God's power, whatever. It's just a testimony that's designed to whet the mouth of those that you're speaking to get them curious about this God that you're talking about, so that when you share the gospel presentation that we will train you in later, then they will be more receptive to actually hear the message. The testimony is not the gospel presentation. It is how you have responded to the gospel presentation, or how the gospel story has been applied to your life. So that's my story. Now take a moment to walk through the worksheet that we've given you so that you can develop your own story. Here's the deal. As you walk through that worksheet, write out your testimony word for word. Have a leader look at it, read over it, and maybe make a couple edits or a couple suggestions, and maybe rewrite it again. And then what I want you to do is to partner up with a partner, and you share your testimony with them, and they can share their testimony with you. This is practice. You're practicing this. This is not you being fake. This is you being prepared. That's important. So when you prepare for your testimony to be shared, God's going to say that one is ready to share their testimony. And you know what? You're going to be given so many more opportunities to share your testimony. You're going to look up, and all of a sudden every conversation you have is almost a link into you being able to share your testimony. Why? Because God knows that you've been faithful with a few things, you've been faithful with a few minutes to share, to walk through your testimony, and He's going to give you opportunities to share your testimony. So take a moment now, walk through the worksheet, partner up, share with one another, and then when you get home tonight, look at yourself in the mirror and share your testimony with yourself in the mirror. Now that's going to be awkward, but guess what? Sharing your testimony with a complete stranger is also awkward. So start practicing the awkward now. I hope you enjoy the time that you spend developing your testimony.